Before the first light touches the fields, a woman stirs from restless sleep. The air is thick with silence, broken only by the creak of a loom and the sigh of tired breath. Her hands move with memory, weaving cloth from thread and sorrow, each strand a quiet prayer to survive another day. Beyond her hut, the world wakes in colors she cannot afford to see. Laughter rises from the merchants by the river, their coins ringing like wind chimes of another life. She looks at the cloth she has woven and feels the weight of her hunger woven within it. Poverty, she thinks, is not just the absence of food. It is the endless repetition of hope unmet. But in that stillness, something shifts. The river outside hums with a patient song, the kind that waits lifetimes to be heard. And for the first time, she wonders not why she is poor, but what poverty truly means. The question lingers in the air like incense, unseen but powerful, as the dawn slowly unfurls its light across her worn face. The sun has risen, spilling gold across the riverbank, where the market hums to life. The scent of spices, sweat, and dust hangs heavy in the air. Anaya carries her folded cloth with careful hands, each step echoing the hope that anyone might notice her work. Around her, the crowd swirls, faces filled with hunger for profit, not compassion. She calls softly to passing merchants, her voice nearly drowned by the chaos. But they glance once, then turn away, eyes drawn to brighter fabrics, smoother tongues. The sound of coins clinking becomes a cruel song of exclusion. She forces a smile that trembles, placing her cloth upon a wooden table as if laying an offering before unseen gods. Yet, deep within, a whisper arises. Perhaps the gods are watching, but through her own patience. The morning stretches endlessly, a test not of hunger, but of faith. A man draped in fine silk steps from a gilded cart, his servants bowing as they spread carpets beneath his feet. His laughter ripples like warm wine through the market, drawing every gaze but hers. He moves with the ease of one untouched by struggle, his fingers heavy with rings that glitter in the sun. Anaya watches him approach a cloth seller, paying thrice the price for fabric she knows she has woven better. Envy stirs in her chest, hot, sharp, alive. Yet beneath it, another feeling hums, quieter but stronger. Shame for wanting what blinds him. She lowers her head, clutching her bundle tighter, as if afraid her heart might spill its longing across the dirt. The monk's voice from the river drifts faintly to her, something about illusion, about seeing beyond gold. But she cannot hear the end of it over the weight of her silence. By noon, dark clouds gather like warning bells above the market. The scent of rain rides the wind, swift and impatient. Anaya hurries to cover her fabrics, but the storm is merciless. Thunder cracks, scattering merchants and customers alike. Within moments, the river floods its banks, swallowing stalls and dreams together. She clutches her soaked cloth, tears mixing with the rain as the current drags her few coins into the mud. For a fleeting instant, she feels the absurdity of it all. How nature takes without judgment, rich and poor alike. In that drowning silence, she lets out a cry not of pain but of surrender. The sound fades beneath the roar of water, and as the storm rages on, she kneels in the mud, staring upward, searching for meaning in a sky that refuses to answer. When the storm finally quiets, the world lies washed and raw. Puddles glisten like broken mirrors, reflecting fragments of loss. Anaya sits motionless by what remains of her stall, her hands empty, yet strangely light. Across the flooded street, the monk still sits unmoved beneath the banyan tree, robes soaked but eyes serene. He watches her, not with pity, but with understanding, as if he has seen this suffering in countless forms. The air feels sacred in its stillness. The market, stripped of its noise and pride, has become a temple of truth. She meets his gaze for a breath, and though no words pass between them, something within her begins to quiet. The monk's stillness speaks louder than the thunder that came before, whispering a truth she cannot yet name. That sometimes loss is the doorway to awakening. The storm passes into memory, leaving the earth perfumed with wet soil and quiet surrender. By the riverbank, the monk gathers fallen branches, his movements slow, deliberate, untouched by haste. Anaya approaches, her clothes still damp, her spirit heavier than the sky before rain. The monk looks up, meeting her gaze with eyes that seem to see beyond her tears. He says nothing at first, only gestures for her to sit beneath the banyan's shelter. She obeys, drawn by something ancient and unspoken. The silence between them becomes a refuge from the world's noise. Finally, his voice emerges, soft, measured, as if each word has already lived 100 lives. The river does not fight the storm, he says. It allows it to pass, and so it remains. She stares at the current, tracing its silver path, and wonders if her own suffering could ever flow so freely. As the fire crackles to life, she speaks, not to him, but to the wind. Her voice trembles between disbelief and pain. If karma is real, she says, then why are the kind poor and the cruel rich? Her words hang like smoke over the flames. The monk listens, unblinking, the reflection of fire dancing in his calm eyes. Because, he replies, karma is not a scale weighed by this world's gold. It is a mirror of intention. She frowns, misunderstanding, for hunger makes philosophy cruel. He adds, the poor can hoard sorrow as tightly as the rich hoard coin. Both become prisoners of what they clutch. His words fall gently, not as sermons, but as invitations. She lowers her gaze to her hands that have held too tightly to pain, and wonders if she has been poorer far longer than she thought. The monk reaches into his satchel and draws out a single grain of rice, holding it on his palm as though it were treasure. What do you own? He asks. She blinks, unsure of his meaning. Debts, hunger, wonder. Nothing, she answers bitterly. He shakes his head. You own this moment, he says. And in this moment, the power to shape your next. The simplicity of it disarms her. The river murmurs as if agreeing. For the first time, she studies his face and sees that his peace is not born of wealth, but of release. The silence that follows feels like a kind of prayer, one without words, without asking, only presence. Her heart rebels against the simplicity of his words. If thought could feed the body, she says, then none would starve. The monk smiles faintly, his silence deepening rather than defending. True, he finally replies, but thought can feed the soul, and the soul creates the hands that work. She looks at her own hands, calloused yet trembling with new understanding. He continues, when you weave with fear, you create scarcity. When you weave with gratitude, the thread itself changes. She laughs bitterly at the thought. Yet, somewhere inside, she feels a subtle shift. Like a door opening in a dark room. The sound of the river grows softer, or perhaps her mind grows still enough to hear it. Evening descends, the sky painting itself in hues of ember and violet. The monk stirs the last embers of the fire, speaking softly as if to the night itself. Every hardship is a seed, he says, but only when buried in patience does it grow. Anaya listens in silence, exhaustion melting into stillness. She looks toward the horizon, where distant village lamps flicker like fading stars. For the first time, she feels no rush to return, no panic, no despair. The air smells of jasmine and ash, the kind of peace that follows surrender. The monk closes his eyes, whispering, rest. Tomorrow begins the same as today, yet you will not be the same. She nods, curling beside the dying fire while the river hums the lullaby of beginnings disguised as endings. Days pass in the quiet rhythm of dawns and sunsets. The world slows to the beat of a heart relearning peace. Each morning, Anaya helps the monk prepare alms, offering rice to those even poorer than herself. The irony once would have burned, but now it humbles her. In their eyes she sees the reflection of her former despair, and through it, compassion awakens like spring after a long frost. The monk does not preach. He simply watches, letting silence do the teaching. One day, as she hands a bowl to a starving child, she feels a sudden lightness, as though the act itself dissolves a lifetime of heaviness. The river murmurs nearby, carrying whispers of something ancient. That generosity is not giving from abundance, but from freedom. She closes her eyes and feels, for the first time, that perhaps she is beginning to live. Anaya begins to notice the small things. The shape of ripples where the river bends, the shimmer of insects dancing in sunlight, the steady pulse of her own breath. Where once she saw burden, she now sees motion. The monk teaches her not through words, but by example, gathering fallen leaves, bowing before the smallest seed. The universe hides its wisdom in plain sight, he murmurs one morning. She smiles, realizing that poverty was never her greatest suffering. It was blindness. That night, she dreams of weaving cloth not from thread, but from the river's reflection. Each strand glows with light she cannot touch, only feel. When she wakes, she understands. The loom is her mind, and the thread her thoughts. One afternoon, a familiar sound returns. The jingle of coins, the murmur of silk. Lord Virai arrives at the riverside, his golden sandals sinking into the wet earth. He comes not with pride this time, but with heaviness in his chest. Rumors of his sleepless nights have spread through the valley. He kneels before the monk, bowing deeply, as if seeking forgiveness from the world itself. Anaya watches, astonished, as the same man who once embodied everything she resented now trembles like a child before truth. The monk greets him with neither praise nor scorn, only silence. That silence pierces deeper than any sermon. For the first time, she sees the strange symmetry of karma, how even wealth can be poverty in disguise. The monk gestures for them both to sit together beneath the banyan's shade. Words are wind, he says softly. Sit and let the river speak. They obey. For a long while, no one moves. The world shrinks to the sound of flowing water and rustling leaves. In that silence, a strange mirror forms, not of glass, but of awareness. She sees her envy reflected in his regret. He sees his greed reflected in her pain. The silence grows heavy, not with tension, but with understanding. Two lives, once divided by wealth, now kneel on the same ground, watching the same river pass. When the monk finally speaks, it is only one word: see. And they do. As the sun dips below the horizon, the monk tells a story. A seed planted in the dark earth, unseen, slowly transforming decay into growth. The seed never asks why it was buried, he says. It only trusts the earth. His words flow like the river, washing over them. Anaya listens, her heart soft as clay. Lord Vira lowers his gaze, tears gathering unashamed. The monk finishes the story and falls silent again, eyes reflecting the first stars of night. In that silence, something within both of them cracks, not in pain, but release. The river continues its song, endless, unchanged, reminding them that all who seek truth eventually dissolve into its current. At dawn, the monk draws a circle in the damp soil, its edges glistening with dew. Two seeds, he says quietly, one planted in gratitude, the other in complaint. The morning air hums with expectancy. He takes two small seeds from his pouch and places them in Anaya's and Lord Virus' palms. Both shall grow, he continues, but only one will bear fruit. They kneel beside him as he buries one seed gently in rich earth and the other in dry sand. Karma, he whispers, is not the soil but the sour. His eyes drift toward the river, reflecting a sky brushed with rose and silver. When the heart is pure, even dust becomes fertile. The words fall into their minds like rain, simple, soft, impossible to ignore. In that moment, the world feels new again, as if everything that ever suffered might still bloom. Days pass. The seed in the fertile soil sprouts, tiny and green, reaching toward the light. The one in the sand remains dry, lifeless, untouched by rain. The monk tends to neither. He only watches. The universe does not choose, he says one morning. It only mirrors what you plant. Anaya waters her seed gently each day, whispering silent gratitude. Lord Vira pours water upon the barren sand with frustration, muttering of fate and injustice. "Why does yours grow?" he asks, voice heavy with disbelief. Anaya looks at her small plant, then at him. "Because I stopped wishing for more," she says softly. The monk smiles faintly, the kind of smile that hides both sorrow and joy, the recognition that all growth is born from surrender. That night, the monk speaks by firelight. "The heart's soil is fed by thought," he says. "If you feed it resentment, weeds will bloom." His voice is soft, but it strikes deep. Anaya listens with tears she doesn't understand. She sees how long she has watered bitterness instead of gratitude. Lord Vira lowers his gaze, realizing how his greed has choked his joy. The fire crackles as the wind shifts. Ash drifts upward like tiny souls seeking freedom. "Karma is not punishment," the monk continues. "It is reflection. What you see is only what you've shown. The silence that follows is heavier than confession, but sweeter than shame." For the first time, they are both still enough to hear the quiet truth within themselves. Morning arrives in a hush. The monk walks to the sprouting seed and touches its tender leaf. "The fruit of gratitude," he murmurs. Then he turns to the barren sand, the lesson of complaint. He looks at both of them and smiles. "Now you must decide which field to keep alive in your heart." The simplicity of his words cuts deeper than any sermon. Lord Vira lowers his head, his wealth feeling like a burden of chains. Anaya bows too, but her heart feels light, as if she has shed centuries of struggle. The monk watches them both as the river glitters with new sunlight, each ripple a promise that even sorrow, once accepted, can be transformed. Under the banyan's wide shade, both weep, not from sorrow but release. The monk says nothing. The sound of their quiet tears mingles with the rustle of leaves, a hymn older than any prayer. When their crying fades, he speaks softly. "Do not mourn your mistakes. They were seeds too." His voice trembles like a distant bell. "When you see that nothing was wasted, your suffering will end." Anaya looks toward the sky, light shimmering in her eyes. Lord Vira bows deeply, forehead touching earth. The monk rises slowly, placing a hand upon each of their shoulders. "The river flows onward," he says, "but now you will walk beside it with open hands." The wind stirs, and the scent of wet soil and renewal fills the... The next dawn arrives softly, the kind that hums rather than shines. In her hut, Anaya returns to her loom. But this time, her hands move not from desperation, but from calm. She breathes with the rhythm of the threads, each pull guided by something wordless, vast and kind. The monk's teachings echo in her heart, not as memory, but as living truth. She no longer weaves to survive. She weaves to understand. The fibers beneath her fingers seem to shimmer faintly, reflecting her stillness. She hums quietly, a melody she does not recall learning. Outside, birds call from wet rooftops, and the air smells of renewal. In her silence, she senses it. The same river that flows beside the village now flows within her, patient and endless. Poverty no longer feels like her name. It feels like an illusion she has outgrown. Days turn into weeks, and her weaving begins to draw attention. The villagers who once passed her by now linger near her door, drawn not by the cloth's beauty, but by the peace it radiates. They say her fabric carries warmth even when cold winds blow. A woman whose husband has fallen ill wraps herself in Anaya's cloth and claims to dream of calm rivers. A farmer buys a small piece to hang above his bed, saying it helps him sleep. Anaya never advertises or boasts. She simply weaves and smiles. What she once considered worthless labor has become a living prayer, and every person who touches her work feels a piece of her awakening. Word spreads beyond the village. Lord Vira returns. This time not with silk or gold, but with empty hands and open eyes. He kneels beside her loom and watches in silence. The sound of the threads moving soothes him more than any chant or prayer. When she pauses, he says, "I once believed gold gave life meaning. Now I see meaning gave gold its shine." She smiles but says nothing, letting his words find their own echo. He places a bundle of fine silk threads at her feet and bows low. "Use these not for me," he whispers, "but for those who have forgotten how to see beauty." The gesture humbles her, and for a moment, the boundaries between giver and receiver vanish like mist. Anaya begins weaving with the silk he gifted, mixing it with the rough cotton she has always used. The result is unlike anything the villagers have ever seen. Soft as moonlight, strong as truth. The monk visits only once that week, smiling when he sees her creation. "You have woven not fabric," he says quietly, "but karma transformed." The words strike something deep within her. Not pride, but gratitude. She touches the cloth and whispers, "It feels alive." The monk nods, eyes bright, "Because it is." Everything that's born of awareness breathes. The sound of the river outside deepens, as though the world itself agrees. When the final piece is finished, she carries it to the river at dusk. The fabric ripples in her hands like flowing water. She dips it into the current, letting the silk absorb the river's voice. The monk watches from afar, his robes fluttering in the evening wind. "Let it flow onward," he says softly. She releases the cloth, and it drifts downstream, catching the last light of the sun. In that glowing current, she sees her old life carried away. Not erased, but redeemed. Behind her, the villagers gather silently, as if witnessing a ritual they don't yet understand. Anaya closes her eyes and breathes deeply, the scent of river and evening merging into something eternal. She smiles, not in triumph, but in peace. A year drifts by like petals on water. The river runs clear again, the valley alive with laughter and song. Anaya's hut has become a refuge for the weary. Travelers, widows, and children find warmth there, not from wealth, but from presence. She no longer speaks of struggle. She listens. Her loom rests against the wall, yet its hum seems to linger in the air, woven into the silence. Bhante Rayan visits seldom now, but his teachings echo in every life she touches. When she cooks, she prays. When she gives, she smiles. The same hands that once trembled in despair now steady the hearts of others. The villagers whisper her name as one might speak of a river that never runs dry. And though gold never touched her hands, abundance flows through everything she does, unseen, endless, serene. In time, she becomes known not as the poor weaver, but as the woman who gives without keeping. People journey from distant towns just to hear her speak of gratitude. Yet she claims no wisdom as her own. "I only listen to the silence between my thoughts," she says. When asked how she changed her fortune, she laughs softly, by no longer trying to change it. The villagers begin to notice that their fields yield more when tended with care rather than greed, that their homes feel lighter when shared with kindness. Her example spreads like fragrance in still air. Poverty still exists, but its weight no longer crushes their hearts. Gratitude, like sunlight, has turned the valley gold. Lord Vira's mansion, once echoing with the sound of coins, now resonates with chanting and laughter. The great hall, where merchants once bargained, has become a space for meditation. He spends his mornings sweeping the floors and his evenings offering food to the poor. When asked why he changed, he simply replies, "I met someone who taught me that silence is worth more than gold." In his humility, he finds peace that eluded him all his life. At night, he sits by the window, looking toward the river's glint in the moonlight, imagining the monk's voice carried by its song. The man who once feared loss now smiles at impermanence, knowing that what flows cannot be taken, it can only be shared. One evening, Bhante Ryan walks along the riverbank as the sun melts into gold. He pauses to watch the water shimmer, his reflection rippling beside the flowing current. "This," he murmurs, "is karma purified. The flow without resistance." His gaze drifts toward the village, where laughter rises like incense. He bows deeply, not to the heavens but to the life before him, the simple, awakened rhythm of giving and receiving. Every sound, every movement, every breath now feels like part of the same eternal chant. He closes his eyes and smiles, knowing his work is nearly done. The river carries away a fallen flower petal, and he whispers, "So it continues." Night falls over the valley. From the hilltop, the village appears as a constellation of flickering lamps, each flame kindled by gratitude. Anaya sits outside her hut, the air cool and fragrant with jasmine. A child rests her head on Anaya's lap, drifting into sleep. The monk's voice echoes faintly in her memory. Peace is not something to reach, but something to remember. She looks toward the river, now silver under the moon, and feels tears of quiet joy. For the first time, she understands that her journey was never from poverty to wealth, but from blindness to sight. In the endless rhythm of flowing water and breathing earth, she hears it. The song of a life no longer grasping, only being. The years unfold like the pages of a sacred text, slow, silent, and filled with meaning between the lines. The seasons change, but the rhythm of the valley remains the same. Anaya's hair has begun to silver, yet her eyes shine brighter than ever. She rises before dawn, walking to the river in stillness. The world is quiet, except for the murmur of flowing water and the soft cooing of doves. She kneels at the edge, her reflection wavering between past and present. "So much of life," she whispers, "was spent chasing what was already here." The wind answers with a gentle sigh. She cups the water in her hands, watching the ripples dance outward, each circle widening into eternity. She feels no sorrow, no pride, only a vast calm, like the space between thoughts. Wealth, she realizes, is not something one holds, but something one becomes. As she returns through the village, she passes fields ripe with grain, laughter rising from every home. The people greet her not as a saint, but as a friend. She stops to help a child tie a bundle of reeds, to comfort a widow, to share a smile with the farmers at work. Every gesture feels sacred. In each pair of eyes she meets, she sees the same quiet flame she once found in the monks. The entire valley has changed, not by decree or miracle, but by imitation of kindness. As she walks past the market where her struggle once began, she feels only gratitude. The sound of coins, once sharp and cruel, now mingles with the soft hum of life well lived. She smiles to herself, realizing that the world had never been against her. It had been waiting for her to awaken. Under the banyan tree, Bhante Rayan sits once more, though his presence feels thinner, almost part of the wind. His eyes meet hers as she approaches. Neither speaks. Words have long become unnecessary. He lifts his hand in blessing, a simple gesture carrying years of shared silence. She bows deeply, her forehead touching the earth. When she looks up again, the space where he sat is empty. Only the sound of rustling leaves remains. A sudden breeze sweeps through, scattering a few petals across the ground. She does not weep. She only smiles. The monk has not gone. He has merely become what he always taught her to see: the river, the wind, the breath of life itself. The evening brings the sound of children playing outside her hut. One curious child approaches and tugs at her sari. "Mother," he asks, "were you ever poor?" The question lingers, innocent yet profound. She looks into his eyes and sees herself many years ago, frightened, hungry, searching. Her heart fills with tender laughter. She says, "I was poor once." The boy tilts his head. "What changed?" She touches his cheek and smiles. "I stopped measuring life in gold and started measuring it in peace." He nods without understanding. Yet somehow the words settle inside him like seeds waiting for rain. As he runs off, she looks toward the glowing horizon, the river, whispering its eternal song. As night descends, the valley sleeps beneath a sky jeweled with stars. Anaya sits alone by the river, the same place where her journey began. The water flows with its eternal calm, whispering to the stones, carrying the songs of countless lives. She breathes deeply, feeling the stillness inside her mirror, the stillness of the world. "Nothing was ever lost," she murmurs. "It all became this." She closes her eyes, her mind as quiet as the moon above. In that moment, she understands the final truth. The wealth of a human life lies not in what is kept, but in what is let go. A soft wind moves through the valley, carrying her whisper to every corner of the night. And then, as gently as the river's flow, all becomes silence.